What if I told you, Gen Z, the generation told to work hard, get a degree, own a home, is more likely to rent for life than ever before? They're the most educated generation in history, and yet, in country after country, they're getting locked out of wealth. So how did we get here? Why is Gen Z losing the wealth war? It's not because they made bad choices, but because the system was rebuilt around different rules. In this video, we'll cover these 4 areas that explain why Gen Z feels locked out of wealth and what can actually change. 1. We'll look at why wealth used to be easier to build. 2. How the rules were changed to favor asset owners and tilt the system against newcomers. 3. The traps Gen Z faces today and a consumer economy that markets credit as a lifestyle. And 4. What could be done to rebalance the system and give younger generations a fair shot? Subscribe now, and let's get into it. Meet Sarah. She graduated, works part-time and freelance, and still lives with her parents because rent in her city is that high. She is saving to buy her own place, but she has student loans, a shaky 0-hours gig contract, and barely makes enough to add to her deposit pot. Does that sound like your situation or someone you know? If so, you're not alone. It's all too common, and the numbers back it up. Let's start with wealth totals. In the UK, an intergenerational audit from the Resolution Foundation shows younger adults have far less family wealth than previous generations did at the same age. In some cases, roughly half what baby boomers had. Across the Atlantic, generational wealth concentration is more striking. Pew and other US studies show older generations own the lion's share of assets and housing. Millennials and Gen Z control a much smaller slice of national wealth. So yes, young people are more educated, more skilled, and more connected than any generation before them. But despite that, their wealth share is tiny. Why? To understand the gap, we have to look at the policy architecture that helped previous generations build wealth. In post-war Britain, first-time buyers could access mortgages with 90 to 95% loan-to-value and with stable interest. House price-to-earnings ratios were typically 3 to 4x median earnings. University was free or heavily subsidized. In the UK, tuition fees were only introduced in 1998. Before then, recent graduates had little to no debt. In the US, the GI Bill, 1944, meant that many could attend college with minimal or no cost up front, and veterans got preferential home loans. Strong unions and regulated labor markets meant wages rose broadly and benefits like pensions or social housing were widespread. Those policies were funded by high taxes plus a post-war global economy that favored mass industrial growth, rising wages, and relatively stable housing finance for someone born in the 1940s to 1960s. Enjoying the video? Hit subscribe. Now for more. Let's continue. Since the 1980s, many financial markets deregulated. Mortgage finance changed. Deposits required jumped from below 10% to 15 to 20% or more for many first-time buyers in the UK and US. Inflation of asset prices. UK average house price rose from £35,000 in 1995 to £285,000 in 2025, according to ONS data, while median earnings rose far more slowly. Ratio of house price to earnings for first-time buyers is now 9x compared to 3.5x 30 years ago. Cost of higher education shifted heavily onto students. UK fees went from negligible to £9,250 per year in the 2020s. US tuition inflation outpaces general inflation by 2 to 3x. Research from the Institute for Fiscal Studies and others show student loan systems and rising interest rates have altered lifetime balances for new graduates. Pensions moved from defined benefit to defined contribution plans. Earlier generations had guaranteed retirement income. Today, many young people rely on private savings and volatile markets. Research such as Connor Stahl's How the Current Economy Will Affect Generation Z's Ability to Retire in the Future shows this is more than just a technical change. It shifts all the risk onto individuals. With stagnant wages and delayed asset ownership, many Gen Z workers will reach retirement age with far less than previous cohorts, even if they save consistently. Projections suggest a significant share of Gen Z could fall short of maintaining even a modest standard of living in retirement. Stock market, property, and asset ownership largely lock so-called passive wealth behind capital. Older cohorts inherited homes or benefited from low property prices. Gen Z are facing sky-high entry costs just to get in the door. Here are the drivers behind Gen Z's lockout. 1. Housing credit and capital barriers. High deposit requirements make mortgages inaccessible. Many lenders in the UK now require 15 to 25% down payments. In pricey US cities, the same is true, plus stricter credit scoring. 2. Student debt. Student debt is no longer just a burden, it's a wealth blocker. Average graduate debt in England is now between £50,000 and £53,000. US student debt totals $1.6 to $1.7 trillion, and many cannot discharge debts early. This delays or prevents saving, investment, or qualifying for mortgages. 3. Consumer credit and marketing pressure. Buy now, pay later. In the UK, over 40% of adults have used it. Its rise is not just convenience. Aggressive marketing, push notifications, influencer promotion make it feel normal. People don't often see cumulative costs until late. And 4. Credit cards, exotic offers, lifestyle ads targeting young people who feel behind socially. Advertisers push consumption as identity. That's not anecdotal. A 2023 survey found that 75% of Gen Z report that social media ads make them feel like they need purchases to keep up. Many fintech credit products have fewer protections than traditional banking. Late fees and variable interest rates stack up. 5. Job precarity and stagnant wages. The gig contracts and other related work arrangements common with younger people may reduce ability to show consistent income when applying for loans or mortgages. Inflation has eaten real wages. For workers under 30, income growth has lagged inflation in many UK regions for the past 10 years. And here's something that's not discussed enough. According to Connor Stahl's analysis, the shift to insecure, lower benefit work also undermines retirement security. Together, these mechanisms don't just slow wealth accumulation, they often block it entirely or impose huge leaks through fees, interest, credit penalties that older generations did not face. This isn't just about luck or generational timing. The system has been redesigned in subtle but potent ways. Reforms and policies favoring asset owners and wealthy interests. In many countries, capital gains and property gains are taxed at far lower rates than income. That benefits those who own property, stocks, or real estate, often older generations. For example, in the UK, favourable capital gains allowances and lower tax on property sale gains help landlords and homeowners. Mortgage interest relief, where still applied or phased out slowly, historically provided benefits to those repaying large mortgages. Younger buyers get less relief and face tougher lending criteria. Planning and zoning laws, restrictive planning, greenbelt protections, local opposition often limit new housing supply, which inflates prices. That benefits existing homeowners, asset owners whose property value rises. Also, property developers, financial services, large asset holders are well represented in political donations and lobbying. This creates resistance to reforms that would redistribute or limit their gains. Yes, wealth tends to accumulate over a lifetime. Older people generally have more assets, savings, property, investments. That's normal, but what matters is rate of accumulation and baseline opportunity. When the rules skew so heavily in favor of those already owning assets, the accumulation for younger cohorts becomes severely hampered. And this isn't just about home ownership or credit. The Connor Stahl study emphasizes that retirement readiness is structurally harder now. With rising healthcare costs, market-dependent pensions, and delayed wealth building, Gen Z will likely work longer, retire later, and have to support higher costs in old age. Older cohorts bought homes when interest rates were higher, but prices much lower, enabling equity growth. Gen Z faces high prices plus high interest plus stricter criteria, so their equity growth is much slower. Let's look at how things are playing out today. Property ownership for under 35s in many UK regions is now under 35%, meaning a majority will be renters for most of their lives. Wealth share. Older generations in the US hold 80 to 90% of total wealth, with millennials and Gen Z combined holding very small percentages. When governments consider reforms, affordable housing, rent control, interest rate subsidies, they often face pushback from powerful vested interests, landlords, finance sector, developers. Resistance delays or dilutes policy. So when I say by design, I mean that many of the institutions and policies that shape wealth were built when the rules were different, and have since shifted in ways that favor those who already have capital. I want to say this again. Building wealth does take time. Experience, savings, investments compound. It's not fair to expect Gen Z to match older generations overnight. But what is unfair, what is avoidable, is having higher hurdles. When down payments, debt burdens, credit costs, taxes, and housing supply are stacked against you from the start, even long-term effort doesn't come close to closing the gap. To bring it all together, Gen Z is not failing. The system is. And we see it in rising house prices, exploding debt, rising rents, and relentless consumer pressure. And if nothing changes, projections suggest that Gen Z could face the lowest retirement readiness of any modern generation. Not because they failed to save, but because the system shifted costs and risks onto them. But change is possible, though it requires more than goodwill. It demands confronting who holds power, who benefits, and why reform is resisted. We need housing policy that builds supply, not just preserves landlord interests. We need student financing based on fairness, not one-size-fits-all debt. We need credit regulation, transparency, caps on predatory fees. We need political courage. And we need it now. If you enjoyed this, watch my other video showing on the screen and in the description below. Don't forget to like, drop a comment, and subscribe. Share this video if it spoke to you, because voices matter and change demands conversation. See you next time.